The sound of weeping carried across the water like a wounded animal's cry, and Harrison Tucker reined in his buckskin mare so fast she nearly sat back on her haunches. He had been riding the fence line of his cattle ranch for the better part of the afternoon, checking for breaks and watching for rustlers, when that sorrowful noise stopped him cold. The Rio Grande ran swift and brown through this stretch of Texas rangeland in the summer of 1883, and Harrison had seen plenty of strange things in his 32 years, but a woman crying by the riverbank was not what he expected to find on a Tuesday in July. He dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the dusty ground with a soft thud, and approached through the cottonwood trees that lined the water's edge. She was sitting on a flat rock with her face buried in her hands, her dress torn and muddy, her dark hair falling loose from what must have once been a proper arrangement. She did not seem to hear him coming, so lost was she in her grief. "Madam." Harrison called out gently, not wanting to startle her. "Are you hurt?" Her head snapped up, and he found himself looking into the most striking pair of green eyes he had ever seen. They were red-rimmed from crying, her face was streaked with dirt and tears, but even in her disheveled state, she was beautiful. She looked to be in her middle 20s, with delicate features and a proud set to her jaw despite her obvious distress. "I am lost," she said, her voice breaking on the words. "I have been walking for hours and I do not know where I am or how to get back to anywhere." Harrison took off his hat and held it against his chest, a gesture of respect his mother had drilled into him before she passed. "Well now," he said, his voice low and calm, "you are found. My name is Harrison Tucker and my ranch is just over that rise. Can you tell me what happened? How did you come to be out here alone?" She stood up shakily, and he noticed her shoes were practically falling apart, the soles flapping loose from the uppers. "My name is Felicity Porter," she said, trying to compose herself and failing as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was traveling with a wagon train heading west to California. We stopped 2 days ago at a settlement for supplies. I went for a walk yesterday morning to gather wildflowers and I got turned around in the hills. When I finally found my way back to where we had camped, everyone was gone. They must have thought I ran off or met with some accident. They left without me." Harrison felt anger rise in his chest at the thought of a wagon train abandoning one of their own, but he kept his voice steady. "That is a hard thing," he said, "but you are safe now. Let me get you back to my ranch. My housekeeper Martha can tend to you, get you cleaned up and fed. Then we will figure out what to do next." Felicity looked at him with such gratitude and relief that something shifted in Harrison's chest. He told himself it was just natural compassion for someone in distress, but the way his heart hammered when she placed her small hand in his rough, calloused one suggested something more complicated was taking root. He helped her mount his horse, then swung up behind her, keeping a respectful distance even as the mare's gait forced them into closer contact than was strictly proper. Felicity sagged back against him with exhaustion, and Harrison found himself acutely aware of the warmth of her body, the scent of her hair despite the dust and sweat of her ordeal. The ride back to the ranch took less than 20 minutes, and as they crested the final hill, Harrison felt an unexpected surge of pride showing Felicity his home. The Tucker Ranch was not the largest spread in this part of Texas, but it was prosperous and well-maintained. The main house was built of adobe and wood, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The barn and outbuildings were sturdy and freshly painted. Cattle grazed in the near pastures, their red hides gleaming in the late afternoon sun. "It is beautiful," Felicity said softly, and Harrison felt warmth spread through him at her words. Martha came bustling out of the house as they rode up, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a heart as big as the Texas sky. She had worked for Harrison's family since he was a boy, and she ran the household with efficient kindness. "Lord have mercy, Harrison. What have you brought home?" Martha said, but her tone was concerned rather than critical. "This is Miss Felicity Porter," Harrison said, dismounting and then helping Felicity down. She swayed on her feet, and he caught her elbow to steady her. "She was abandoned by her wagon train. She needs food, rest, and medical attention if she has any injuries." Martha's expression shifted immediately to one of maternal concern. "You poor dear," she said, coming forward to take Felicity's arm. "Come with me. We will get you sorted out proper. Harrison, you let us be. Women's business now." Harrison watched as Martha led Felicity into the house, and he found himself reluctant to let her out of his sight. He shook his head at his own foolishness and went to tend to his horse, but his mind kept returning to those green eyes and that broken voice saying she was lost. Inside, Martha drew a hot bath and helped Felicity out of her ruined clothing. She examined the younger woman for injuries and found mostly superficial cuts and bruises, though Felicity's feet were badly blistered from walking in inadequate shoes. Martha tutted and fussed and applied salve to the wounds, then wrapped them in clean bandages. "You were lucky Harrison found you when he did," Martha said, helping Felicity into a clean nightgown that had belonged to Harrison's late mother. "This country is not kind to people alone and on foot. There are dangers beyond just getting lost." "I know," Felicity said quietly. "I was beginning to think I would die out there. I had no water left and the sun was so hot. I made it to the river, but I did not know which direction to go. I just sat down and cried because I could not think what else to do." Martha patted her hand. "Well, you are safe now. Harrison is a good man, one of the best I have known. He will see you right." After the bath, Martha brought Felicity to the kitchen and fed her beef stew and fresh bread with butter. Felicity ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger as her body remembered it needed fuel. Harrison came in as she was finishing her second bowl, his hair damp from his own washing up, wearing clean clothes. "Feeling better?" he asked, and Felicity nodded. "Much better, thank you. I cannot express how grateful I am for your kindness, both of you." Harrison sat down across from her at the big kitchen table. "Can you tell me more about this wagon train? Where were they headed exactly? Maybe we can send word and catch up with them." Felicity's expression clouded. "They were going to Sacramento. The wagon master's name was Jacob Brennan. We left Independence, Missouri in April. There were 15 wagons when we started, but we lost 2 families along the way. Some people turned back after we crossed into Kansas, deciding it was too hard." "And you were traveling alone?" Harrison asked gently. "No family with you?" Felicity looked down at her hands. "My parents died of cholera 3 years ago in Ohio. I have been working as a teacher in a small town, but the school closed due to lack of funds. When I heard about opportunities in California, I thought it was a chance for a new start. I used my savings to buy passage with the wagon train. Everything I owned was in my trunk on that wagon." Harrison saw the despair in her eyes and felt his protective instincts surge. "We will send a telegram to the settlements along the western route," he said. "See if we can locate your belongings. But Miss Porter, I want you to know you are welcome to stay here as long as you need. We have plenty of room and Martha enjoys the company." "That is more than generous," Felicity said, tears threatening again. "But I do not want to impose. Perhaps you could take me to the nearest town and I could find work there, earn enough for passage west." Martha made a dismissive noise. "The nearest town of any size is Rio Vista, and it is 3 days' ride from here. You are not going anywhere on those feet for at least a week, maybe 2. Besides, Harrison could use help with the books. His handwriting is terrible, and he is always behind on correspondence." Harrison shot Martha a look, but she ignored him cheerfully. Truth was, he could use help with the paperwork side of running the ranch. He was good with cattle and horses, could fix anything that broke and handle any problem that came up with the land or the animals, but sitting at a desk writing letters and tallying figures made him want to climb the walls. "I do not want charity," Felicity said quietly but firmly. "If I stay, I must be useful. I must earn my keep." "Then we will call it employment," Harrison said. "Room and board plus a small wage in exchange for helping with ranch correspondence and bookkeeping. When you are ready to move on, we can discuss what comes next. Is that agreeable?" Felicity met his eyes and something passed between them, a connection neither could name but both felt. "That is agreeable," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Tucker." "Harrison," he said. "Just Harrison. We are not formal out here. Then you must call me Felicity." Martha smiled to herself as she watched the two of them, seeing something neither had yet acknowledged. She had known Harrison since he was in short pants, and she had never seen him look at a woman the way he was looking at Felicity Porter. The next few days fell into an easy rhythm. Felicity's feet healed slowly but steadily, and she spent her time in Harrison's study, organizing papers that had been shoved into drawers and stacked haphazardly on every surface. She found letters from cattle buyers that had never been answered, bills that needed paying, and records that needed updating. She set about bringing order to the chaos, and Harrison was amazed at the transformation. "How did you know how to organize all this?" he asked one evening, standing in the doorway of the study and watching her work. "My father was a merchant before he died," Felicity said, looking up from the ledger she was updating. "He taught me accounting and bookkeeping. He said a good education was the best inheritance he could give me." I suppose he was right. Harrison came into the room and sat in the chair across from the desk. "Tell me about them, your parents." Felicity set down her pen, a wistful expression crossing her face. "They were wonderful people, kind and loving. My mother was a teacher, which is why I went into that profession. My father was smart about business but generous to a fault. They would have liked you, I think. My father always said you could tell a man's character by how he treated those who could do nothing for him. You rescued me when I was nothing but a burden, and you have shown me nothing but kindness and respect." "You are not a burden," Harrison said firmly, "and I did what anyone with a shred of decency would do." "I think you would be surprised how few people have that shred," Felicity said quietly. "The world can be cruel, especially to women alone." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Harrison found himself wanting to tell her things he had not spoken of in years. "My parents are gone too," he said. "My father died when I was 20, thrown from a horse. My mother passed 2 years later. The doctor said it was her heart, but I think it was grief. She loved my father something fierce. I have been running this ranch alone ever since, with Martha's help, of course. 10 years now." "Do you have siblings?" Felicity asked. "A brother," Harrison said, and his expression darkened. "Randall. He is 2 years younger than me. When our parents died, we were supposed to run the ranch together, but Randall had no interest in the work. He wanted his share of the inheritance in cash so he could go east and live like a gentleman. We fought about it. Bad. I bought him out, took a loan to do it. I just finished paying it off last year." "Do you ever hear from him?" "Once or twice. Letters asking for money, usually. I send what I can spare, but it is never enough. We are not close anymore, and that is a sadness I carry." Felicity stood and came around the desk, and before Harrison quite knew what was happening, she placed her hand on his shoulder. The touch was brief but electric, and when she returned to her seat, both of them were flushed and flustered. "I am sorry," Felicity said. "That was too familiar." "No," Harrison said quickly. It was kind, thank you. As the days turned into weeks, Harrison found himself inventing reasons to be near Felicity. He would ask her opinion on which cattle to sell, though he had been making those decisions successfully for a decade. He would request her help with letters to buyers, even simple ones he could have written himself. He found himself listening for her voice in the house, watching for her to come out onto the porch in the evenings when the heat of the day finally broke. Felicity, for her part, was equally aware of Harrison. She noticed the way he was gentle with the animals, firm but never cruel. She saw how the ranch hands respected him, how they worked hard because they wanted to, not because they feared him. She observed his quiet competence, the way he could fix a broken fence or deliver a calf or track a lost steer with equal skill. And she noticed, though she tried not to, the breadth of his shoulders and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. One evening in early August, a storm rolled in from the west, bringing much-needed rain and spectacular lightning. Felicity stood on the porch watching the display, fascinated by the raw power of the weather. Harrison came out to join her, and they stood side by side as the wind whipped around them. "It is beautiful," Felicity said, raising her voice to be heard over the thunder. "And dangerous," Harrison said. "We should go inside." But neither of them moved. A particularly bright bolt of lightning struck close by, and Felicity startled, stumbling slightly. Harrison caught her, his hands on her arms, and suddenly they were very close, looking at each other in the flickering storm light. "Felicity," Harrison said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," she whispered. He released her and stepped back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I am trying to be a gentleman," he said. "You are under my protection. You are my employee. I should not be thinking what I am thinking or feeling what I am feeling." Felicity's heart raced. "What are you feeling?" Harrison turned to look at her, and the raw honesty in his expression took her breath away. "That finding you by that river was the best thing that ever happened to me," he said. "That I wake up every morning grateful you are here. That the thought of you leaving tears me up inside. But I know I have no right to say these things. You have your own plans and dreams. California, remember? A new start." Felicity stepped closer to him, her own courage rising. "What if my plans have changed?" she said. "What if I have found something here I did not expect to find?" "And what is that?" Harrison asked, hardly daring to hope. "A home," Felicity said simply. "A place where I am valued, a man who looks at me like I matter." Harrison closed the distance between them in 2 strides and cupped her face in his hands. "You do matter," he said fiercely. "More than I know how to say." He kissed her then, soft and gentle despite the passion building between them, and Felicity felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the rain had started in earnest, soaking them where they stood. They laughed and ran inside, dripping water on Martha's clean floors. The housekeeper took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly, handing them towels without comment. That night, lying in bed in the room that had become hers, Felicity stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of what she was feeling. She had known Harrison for less than 6 weeks, and yet she could not imagine her life without him in it. Was it gratitude she felt? Or was it something deeper, more real and lasting? She thought about the life she had been heading toward in California. She would have found work as a teacher, most likely. She would have been respectable and independent, but also alone. Here at the ranch, she had found something she had not even known she was looking for. She had found belonging. The next morning, Harrison was awkward and apologetic. "I overstepped last night," he said, finding her in the study where she was working on the monthly accounts. "I took advantage of the moment and I am sorry. It will not happen again unless you want it to." Felicity stood and walked over to him, taking his hand in both of hers. I wanted to, she said clearly. But Harrison, we should be sensible about this. We barely know each other. I do not want either of us to make a mistake we will regret. You are right, Harrison said, though everything in him wanted to pull her close and never let go. We should take time, court properly. Let you be sure this is what you want. And so they courted in the old-fashioned way. Harrison took Felicity on rides around the ranch, showing her the places he loved. They had picnics by the river where he had first found her, and Felicity told him it no longer made her sad to be there. They sat on the porch in the evenings and talked about everything and nothing. Harrison told her about his dreams for the ranch, his plans to improve the herd and expand into new pastures. Felicity talked about books she had read and places she hoped to see someday. Martha watched over them like a benevolent chaperone, making sure they were never alone for too long, but also giving them space to grow closer. She had long hoped Harrison would find someone to share his life with, and she could not have asked for a better match than Felicity. In September, a telegram arrived from Rio Vista. The wagon master Jacob Brennan had responded to the inquiries Harrison had sent out weeks before. Felicity's trunk and belongings had been stored in El Paso, waiting for her to claim them. She could retrieve them if she wished, or they could be sent on to California as originally planned. Felicity held the telegram in her hands and felt the weight of the decision before her. Retrieving her belongings would mean making a choice about her future, staying or going. Harrison or California? What do you want to do? Harrison asked, his voice carefully neutral though his heart was in his throat. Felicity looked up at him. I want my things sent here, she said, to the ranch, because this is where I want to be if you still want me to stay. Harrison's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen on him. Want you to stay, he said. Felicity, I want so much more than that. I want you to stay forever. I want you to marry me. I know it is fast, and I know I should wait longer to ask, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Felicity felt joy bubble up inside her like champagne. Then ask me, she said. Harrison dropped to one knee right there in the dusty yard, taking her hand in his. Felicity Porter, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Will you build a life with me here on this ranch? Will you let me love you for the rest of my days? Yes, Felicity said, tears streaming down her face. Yes to all of it. He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. Martha came running out of the house at the commotion, and when they told her the news, she cried too and hugged them both. About time, she said, wiping her eyes. I have been praying for this since the day Harrison brought you home. They were married in late October, on a perfect autumn day when the air was cool and crisp, and the sky was endlessly blue. The ceremony was held at the small church in Rio Vista, with Martha and the ranch hands in attendance, along with several neighboring ranchers and their families. Felicity wore a dress of cream-colored silk that had belonged to Harrison's mother, altered to fit her smaller frame. Harrison wore his best suit and looked so handsome that Felicity's breath caught when she saw him waiting for her at the altar. The minister spoke about love and commitment, about two people becoming one, and Felicity felt the truth of those words settle into her bones. When Harrison slipped the simple gold ring onto her finger and said his vows, his voice strong and sure, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed twice the number of guests. There was music and dancing, and Harrison held Felicity close as they swayed to a fiddle tune under the stars. Are you happy? He murmured into her hair. Happier than I knew it was possible to be, she replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. That night, in the bedroom they would now share, Harrison made love to his wife with tenderness and passion. and Felicity discovered depths of feeling she had not known existed. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she thought about the strange path that had led her here. "I was so afraid that day by the river," she said softly. "I thought I was going to die alone and forgotten." Harrison tightened his arms around her. "You will never be alone again," he said. "And you could never be forgotten. You are written on my heart, Felicity Tucker." She smiled at the sound of her new name, Felicity Tucker. It felt right, like coming home after a long journey. The first year of their marriage was one of discovery and adjustment. Felicity learned the rhythms of ranch life, the endless cycle of work that kept the place running. She learned to ride well enough to accompany Harrison on his rounds, sitting tall in the saddle and loving the freedom of galloping across open range. She took over all the bookkeeping and correspondence, proving to have a sharp head for business. More than once, her suggestions saved Harrison money or opened up new opportunities. Harrison, in turn, learned what it meant to have a true partner. He had been independent for so long, making all decisions alone, that it was an adjustment to consider someone else's needs and opinions. But it was a change he welcomed. Felicity made him think about things in new ways. She challenged him when she thought he was wrong and supported him when he doubted himself. She made the house a home, filling it with warmth and laughter and love. In the spring of 1885, Felicity discovered she was pregnant. She was nervous to tell Harrison, unsure how he would react to the news. But when she finally found the courage to speak the words, his joy was unmistakable. He picked her up and spun her around, much as he had done when she agreed to marry him, then immediately set her down with concern. "Did I hurt you? Should you be sitting down? What do you need?" Felicity laughed at his sudden fussing. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she said. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." But Harrison worried nonetheless, hovering over her and trying to prevent her from doing any work he deemed too strenuous. Martha finally had to sit him down and explain the facts of pregnancy, assuring him that Felicity was healthy and strong and perfectly capable of managing normal activities. As summer gave way to fall and Felicity's belly grew round with their child, Harrison found himself overwhelmed with a new kind of love. He would place his hand on her stomach and feel their baby move, marveling at the miracle of life they had created together. He talked to Felicity's belly at night, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together. "What if I am not a good father?" he asked one night, voicing his deepest fear. Felicity took his face in her hands and looked him in the eye. "You will be a wonderful father," she said with absolute certainty. "You are patient and kind and strong. Our child will be blessed to have you." In November, as an early winter storm raged outside, Felicity went into labor. Martha took charge with calm efficiency, boiling water and laying out clean linens while Harrison paced the floor wearing a path in the wood. The labor was long and difficult, lasting well into the night, and there were moments when Harrison thought he might lose his mind from worry and helplessness. But finally, in the dark hours before dawn, a baby's cry pierced the air and Martha came out with a tired smile. "You have a son," she said. "A big, healthy boy, and Felicity is tired but well." Harrison rushed into the bedroom to find his wife propped up against pillows, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked exhausted, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but when she looked up at him, her eyes were shining. "Come meet your son," she said. Harrison approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the small red face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving tiny fists in the air. Something inside Harrison's chest cracked open, and tears spilled down his cheeks. "He is perfect," Harrison whispered. "You are perfect. I love you both so much." They named him Henry Porter Tucker, honoring both their families. Henry was a good baby, healthy and strong-lunged, and he quickly became the center of their world. Harrison was a devoted father, getting up in the night to help with feedings, changing nappies without complaint, and spending hours just watching his son sleep. As Henry grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Felicity's business sense combined with Harrison's hard work and expertise with cattle created a profitable operation. They were able to hire more hands, expand the herd, and improve the facilities. The Tucker Ranch became known throughout the region for the quality of its beef and the fairness of its dealings. In the spring of 1887, Felicity became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in December, she gave birth to a daughter they named Hope Alice Tucker. Hope had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and from the moment she arrived, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Harrison held his daughter close and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "Two perfect children," he said to Felicity. "How did I get so lucky? We found each other," Felicity said simply. Everything else followed from that. As the years passed, Henry and Hope grew strong and healthy. Henry was serious and thoughtful, showing an early aptitude for working with animals. Hope was wild and adventurous, always getting into mischief and keeping her parents on their toes. Together, they filled the house with noise and love and the beautiful chaos of family life. In the summer of 1890, Harrison's brother Randall showed up at the ranch unannounced. He arrived in a fancy carriage, dressed in expensive clothes that had seen better days, and Harrison felt a complicated mix of emotions at seeing him. They had not spoken in nearly 8 years. "Randall," Harrison said carefully, "this is unexpected." "Hello, brother," Randall said, and there was a weariness in his voice that spoke of hard lessons learned. "I know I have no right to show up like this, but I had nowhere else to go. I have made a mess of things back east, lost everything. I was hoping you might have a place for me here." Felicity, standing beside Harrison with Hope on her hip and Henry clutching her skirt, studied her brother-in-law with assessing eyes. She had heard the stories, knew the hurt that still lingered between the two men. But she also saw the genuine desperation in Randall's face and felt compassion stir. "We always have room for family," Felicity said before Harrison could respond. She looked at her husband, silently asking him to give his brother another chance. Harrison saw the request in her eyes and felt his resistance soften. This was what she did, he thought. She made him better, kinder, more forgiving. "You can stay," he said to Randall. "But if you stay, you work. No free rides and no asking for money. If you want to rebuild your life, you do it with honest labor." Randall's relief was palpable. "Thank you," he said. "I will not let you down, not again." It was not easy at first. Randall had to learn the hard way that ranch work was nothing like living as a gentleman in the East. He complained about the early mornings and the physical demands of the work. But slowly, over months, something changed in him. The honest labor and the clear expectations stripped away the pretension and entitlement, revealing the man underneath. He proved to have a talent for working with horses, and Harrison put him in charge of training the new stock. The relationship between the brothers healed gradually. They would never be as close as they had been as boys, but they found a new respect and understanding. Randall became a true part of the ranch, contributing to its success and finding purpose he had lacked in his former life. He was a devoted uncle to Henry and Hope, teaching them to ride and telling them stories that made them laugh. One evening, after the children were in bed and Randall had gone to his own quarters, Harrison and Felicity sat together on the porch, much as they had done throughout their years together. The night was warm and full of stars, and Harrison pulled his wife close against his side. "You knew what I needed before I did," he said. "With Randall, I mean. If you had not welcomed him, I would have sent him away. I would have carried that regret forever." "Family is complicated," Felicity said, "but it is also precious. I lost mine, so I know the value of it. I could not let you lose yours if there was a chance to repair it." Harrison kissed the top of her head. "Do you ever think about that day I found you by the river? How different everything could have been?" "I think about it often," Felicity admitted. "If I had walked in a different direction that morning when I got lost, if you had ridden a different section of fence that day, if I had been found by someone else or not at all, our whole lives balanced on such small chances." "I do not believe in chance," Harrison said. "I believe you were meant to be there and I was meant to find you. We were meant for each other." Felicity turned in his arms to look up at him. "You really believe that?" "I do," Harrison said firmly. "I have never been more sure of anything. You are my heart, Felicity. You are the best part of me. I was just existing before you came along. You taught me how to truly live." She kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into that connection. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Let us go to bed," Felicity said. "Tomorrow will come early as always." But Harrison held her back for a moment longer. "Wait," he said. "I want to tell you something. I want to say it while it is just us and the stars in this perfect moment." "What is it?" Felicity asked, her heart swelling with love for this man who still found ways to surprise her after all these years. "When you said you were lost that day by the river, I said you were found. But the truth is, we found each other. I was just as lost as you were. I just did not know it. I was going through the motions of life without really living it. You showed me what it means to have purpose beyond work, to have joy beyond accomplishment. You gave me a family and a home in the truest sense. You found me, Felicity, and I am grateful for it every single day." Tears slipped down Felicity's cheeks. "I love you," she whispered, "more than words can ever say." "And I love you," Harrison replied, "beyond measure and for all time." They went inside then, hand in hand, passing through the house they had built together. They checked on Henry, who was sprawled across his bed with a book still open beside him, having fallen asleep while reading. They peeked in on Hope, who slept with the fierce commitment she brought to everything, her little fists clenched and her hair a wild tangle on the pillow. Each small detail was precious to them, evidence of the life they had created from that chance meeting so many years ago. In the years that followed, the Tucker Ranch continued to thrive. Harrison and Felicity celebrated their 10th anniversary in 1893 with a party that brought together friends and neighbors from miles around. Martha, now in her 60s but still spry and sharp-tongued, oversaw the preparations with her usual efficiency. Randall, who had become a steady and valued part of the operation, gave a toast that made both Harrison and Felicity cry. "I have watched my brother build something extraordinary here," Randall said, raising his glass. "Not just a successful ranch, though it is certainly that, but a real home, full of love and laughter. He found a woman weeping by a river, lost and alone, and he did not just offer her shelter. He offered her his heart, and she gave him hers in return. In doing so, they created something rare and beautiful. To Harrison and Felicity, may they have many more years of happiness together." The gathered crowd raised their glasses and cheered, and Harrison pulled Felicity into his arms for a kiss that made their children groan with embarrassment and everyone else smile. Henry was 8 now, tall for his age and already showing signs of the man he would become. He followed his father everywhere, learning the ins and outs of running a cattle ranch. He had a gentle way with animals and a quick mind for numbers, combining the best traits of both his parents. Hope was 6, and she lived up to her name with an optimism and enthusiasm that was infectious. She was fearless in ways that terrified her father, climbing trees and racing horses and exploring every corner of the ranch. But she also had her mother's compassionate heart, always noticing when someone was sad or hurt and trying to help. In the winter of 1894, a hard freeze hit Texas, destroying crops and killing livestock across the region. The Tucker Ranch weathered the storm better than many, thanks to Harrison's careful planning and the solid infrastructure they had built. But their neighbors suffered, and Felicity organized relief efforts, gathering supplies and distributing them to families in need. "You have such a generous heart," Harrison said, watching her coordinate the distribution of food and blankets. "I remember what it feels like to have nothing," Felicity said. "To be lost and afraid with no one to turn to. If we can help others avoid that feeling, we should." The community did not forget the Tuckers' kindness during that difficult winter. It strengthened bonds and created friendships that would last for generations. When spring finally came and the land began to recover, there was a collective sense of relief and gratitude. In May of 1895, tragedy struck when Martha suffered a heart attack. She survived, but she was weakened and could no longer manage the household as she once had. Felicity insisted that Martha remain at the ranch, cared for as family, and took over more of the household duties herself. Martha protested, hating to be a burden, but both Harrison and Felicity made it clear that she was not up for discussion. "You cared for me from the time I was a boy," Harrison said, sitting by Martha's bedside. "You kept this house running. You welcomed Felicity when I brought her home, and you have loved our children like they were your own grandchildren. Now it is our turn to care for you. We are not debating this." Martha wiped tears from her eyes. "I am a lucky woman," she said, "to have spent my life with such good people." "We are the lucky ones," Felicity said, taking Martha's hand. "You are family, Martha, and family takes care of each other." Martha recovered slowly but never regained her full strength. She spent her days sitting in a chair by the window, doing mending and entertaining Hope with stories. She passed away peacefully in her sleep in the autumn of 1896, and the family mourned her deeply. They buried her in the small family cemetery on the ranch, next to Harrison's parents, because that was where she belonged. The loss hit Harrison hard. Martha had been a constant in his life since his mother died, a connection to his past and a steady presence. But Felicity helped him through the grief, as she always did, reminding him to focus on gratitude for the time they had shared rather than sorrow over the time lost. As the century drew to a close, Henry prepared to take on more responsibility at the ranch. At 15, he was already as tall as his father and nearly as capable. He had a young man's enthusiasm and energy, but also a mature understanding of the work and commitment required. Harrison taught him everything he knew, and Felicity made sure he understood the business side of the operation. Hope, at 13, was blossoming into a remarkable young woman. She had not outgrown her adventurous spirit, but had channeled it into productive pursuits. She helped train horses alongside her Uncle Randall, and assisted her mother with managing the household and supporting community initiatives. She had her mother's green eyes and quick intelligence, and her father's protective instincts went into overdrive whenever young men from neighboring ranches came around. In the summer of 1900, on a day much like the one when they first met, Harrison and Felicity rode out to the river. It had become a tradition for them over the years, marking their anniversary with a return to the place where their story began. They dismounted and walked to the flat rock where he had first seen her weeping. So much had changed since that day 17 years ago, but the river still flowed swift and brown, and the cottonwoods still provided shade from the summer sun. "You remember what I looked like that day?" Felicity asked, settling herself on the rock. "I was such a mess. Dirty and crying and completely defeated." Harrison sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," he said. "Even disheveled and distressed, there was something about you that reached inside me and grabbed hold." "I was terrified when you first appeared," Felicity admitted. "I did not know if you were going to help me or harm me. But then you spoke, and your voice was so kind. And you took off your hat like a gentleman. Such a small thing, but it told me you were safe." "I am glad I found you," Harrison said. "I am glad I rode that section of fence that day. I am glad I heard you crying. I am glad for every small chance and choice that brought us together." Felicity leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have built a good life," she said. "A life full of love and family and purpose. Our children are healthy and happy. The ranch is successful. We have weathered storms and celebrated joys. I could not have imagined any of this when I was sitting here crying, thinking I was going to die alone." "You said you were lost," Harrison reminded her, repeating the words that had started it all. "And I said you were found. But looking back now, I think we both were lost. We just did not know it until we found each other." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the river flow past, each lost in their own thoughts and memories. The afternoon sun painted everything in gold, and the sound of the water was soothing. Finally, Harrison stood and helped Felicity to her feet. "Come on," he said. "Let us head home. Henry will be wondering where we are, and Hope is probably up to some kind of mischief." As they rode back to the ranch, cresting the final hill that gave them a view of their home, Felicity felt a profound sense of contentment. The house sprawled below them, solid and welcoming. Smoke rose from the chimney where dinner was being prepared. Horses grazed in the corrals, and cattle dotted the pastures. She could see Henry working with one of the hands near the barn, and Hope's laughter carried on the wind. "This is everything I never knew I wanted," Felicity said softly. Harrison looked at her, his expression full of love. "It is everything I always wanted but thought I would never find," he said. "You made this possible, Felicity. You made me whole." They rode down the hill together, side by side, partners in every sense of the word. As they approached the house, both children came running out to greet them. Henry was dusty from work but grinning, and Hope was talking a mile a minute about something that had happened with one of the new foals. That night, after dinner was finished and the children were settled in their rooms, Harrison and Felicity sat on the porch in the gathering darkness. Randall joined them for a while, talking about plans for the upcoming cattle drive and asking Harrison's advice on a training issue with one of the horses. The conversation was easy and comfortable, the kind that came from years of working together and mutual respect. After Randall headed to his own quarters, Harrison pulled Felicity into his lap, and she settled against him with a contented sigh. They swayed gently in the porch swing, the chains creaking softly with the movement. "Do you ever wonder how different things would be if I had not gotten lost that day?" Felicity asked. "If the wagon train had not left without me?" "I try not to think about it," Harrison admitted. "It makes me too aware of how easily I could have lost you before I ever found you." "But I suppose you would be in California somewhere, teaching school. Maybe you would have married someone else, had a different life." "I do not think I would have," Felicity said thoughtfully. "I think I would have remained alone. Because my heart was always waiting for you even before I knew you existed." Harrison tightened his arms around her. "That is poetry," he said. "You have such a way with words." "I learned from all those books I read as a child," Felicity said with a smile, "but it is true nonetheless. I feel like everything in my life led me to that moment by the river. Every choice, every sorrow, every joy, it all brought me to the exact place I needed to be for you to find me." "That is a beautiful way to think about it," Harrison said. "Like there is a plan to everything, even when it seems random or cruel." They fell silent again, and Felicity could tell Harrison was thinking deeply about something. She waited patiently, knowing he would speak when he was ready. "I have been thinking about the future," Harrison said eventually. "About what happens to the ranch after I am gone. Henry is shaping up to be a fine rancher, and I think he will run this place even better than I have. But I want to make sure Hope is provided for too. I want her to have options and opportunities, not to feel like she has to marry for security." "You are a good father," Felicity said, "always thinking about their futures. But Harrison, you have years ahead of you, we both do. Let us not worry too much about what comes after." "I know," Harrison said, "but building this life with you has taught me the importance of planning ahead, of making sure the people you love are cared for. I just want everything to be in order so our children never have to struggle the way we did." "They will not struggle," Felicity assured him, "because they have us and they have each other. We have given them everything they need to succeed. Love, education, work ethic, and values. The rest will take care of itself." Harrison kissed her forehead. "When did you get so wise?" "I have always been wise," Felicity said with mock indignation. "You just needed time to notice." Harrison laughed, and the sound filled Felicity with joy. She had heard that laugh countless times over the years, but it never failed to make her smile. As the years continued to roll forward, the new century brought changes to the Texas landscape. Railroads expanded, bringing easier access to markets and more settlers to the region. Automobiles began to appear, though they were still rare and viewed with suspicion by old-timers who trusted horses. The world was modernizing, but the Tucker Ranch remained rooted in the traditions and values that had made it successful. In 1903, Henry announced his intention to marry Rachel Brennan, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. She was a sweet-natured young woman with a practical mind and a love of ranch life. Harrison and Felicity approved wholeheartedly, and the wedding was held at the ranch in the spring of 1904. Henry was 19, old enough to know his own mind, and Rachel was 18. They were young but mature, and anyone could see they were truly in love. Watching his son get married, Harrison was transported back to his own wedding day. He remembered the nervousness and excitement, the profound sense of stepping into a new chapter. He caught Felicity's eye across the crowd, and she smiled at him with understanding. They had walked this path before, and now they were watching their son begin his own journey. A year later, in 1905, Henry and Rachel welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Martha in honor of the woman who had been such an important part of the Tucker family. Harrison became a grandfather at 47, and the experience filled him with awe. Holding his tiny granddaughter, feeling the weight of her in his arms and seeing his features reflected in her small face, he understood in a new way the legacy he and Felicity had created. "She looks like you," Felicity said, standing beside him and gazing down at baby Martha. "She looks like all of us," Harrison said, "past and future all wrapped up together." Hope, now 18 herself, adored her new niece and spent hours helping Rachel with the baby, but she showed no signs of wanting to settle down herself. She had dreams of seeing more of the world, of experiencing life beyond the ranch. Harrison struggled with this, wanting to keep his daughter close but also knowing he had to let her grow. "She is just like you," Felicity told him one evening when he expressed his concerns. "Independent and adventurous. You cannot clip her wings, Harrison. She will come back to us when she is ready." But the world is dangerous for women alone, Harrison protested. Look what happened to you when you were traveling. And look how it turned out, Felicity reminded him gently. I survived and I found something wonderful. You have to trust that Hope will find her own path. We raised her to be strong and smart. She will be fine. In the end, they compromised. Hope went to El Paso to stay with a cousin of Felicity's who had moved there years before, working as a clerk in a mercantile store and experiencing city life. She wrote letters home every week, full of descriptions of the bustling streets and the different people she met. Harrison read every letter multiple times, looking for any sign that his daughter was unhappy or in trouble, but all he found was evidence of a young woman thriving in a new environment. Hope returned to the ranch 2 years later in 1907 with stories to tell and a new maturity about her. She had seen enough of the wider world to appreciate what she had at home, but she had also gained confidence and experience that would serve her well. She resumed her work with the horses, taking over more and more of that operation from Randall, who was now in his 50s and happy to let the younger generation take the lead. In the summer of 1908, Randall met a widow named Elizabeth who had moved to the area with her 2 young children. She was a kind, practical woman who had been through her own share of hardships, and she and Randall found comfort and companionship in each other. They married quietly in the fall, and Elizabeth and her children moved to the ranch. Randall proved to be an excellent stepfather, and seeing him settled and happy gave Harrison a deep satisfaction. By 1910, the Tucker Ranch was a multi-generational enterprise. Harrison and Felicity, now in their 50s, were still active in running the operation but increasingly delegated day-to-day decisions to Henry and Hope. Rachel proved to be an asset to the family business, with a talent for managing finances that rivaled Felicity's. Baby Martha was now 5 years old, with a little brother named James who was 3. The house that had once seemed so large and empty was now full of life and noise and love. One evening, as Harrison and Felicity celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, they hosted a party that brought together everyone who mattered to them. Friends and neighbors came from miles around. Henry gave a toast that made his parents cry. Hope performed a comic skit that had everyone laughing until their sides hurt. Randall and Elizabeth danced together, looking content and peaceful. The grandchildren ran around underfoot, getting into harmless trouble and being indulged by everyone. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Harrison pulled Felicity aside and led her out to the porch. The night was clear and warm, and the stars seemed close enough to touch. 25 years, Harrison said wonderingly. A quarter of a century. Where did the time go? Into building a life, Felicity said. Into raising children and running a ranch and loving each other. That is where it went, and I would not change a single moment. Not even the hard parts, Harrison asked. The droughts and the losses and the times we struggled. Not even those, Felicity confirmed. Because they taught us things we needed to know, they made us stronger together, and they made the good times that much sweeter. Harrison pulled a small box from his pocket and handed it to her. I got you something, he said. I know we said no gifts, but I could not resist. Felicity opened the box to find a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. She opened it and gasped. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of each of their children when they were babies. Harrison, she breathed. This is beautiful, perfect. I wanted you to have something that captured what matters most, Harrison said, helping her fasten the locket around her neck. Our family, the legacy of love we have built together. Felicity touched the locket, feeling its weight against her chest. I will treasure it always, she promised. They stood together on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, and looked out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. The land stretched out before them, familiar and beloved, and they could hear the sounds of their family settling down for the night inside the house. "You said I was found that day by the river," Felicity murmured. "But I think it was more than that. I think I was finally seen, really seen for who I was and who I could become. You looked at a lost, frightened woman and saw possibility. You saw worth." "Because it was there," Harrison said simply. "It was always there, I just recognized it. And I saw a good man," Felicity continued. "Strong but gentle, capable but humble, a man who could build a life worth living. I saw my future in your eyes and I was not afraid." Harrison tilted her chin up so he could look into her face. The years had left their mark, lines around her eyes and threads of silver in her hair, but to him, she was as beautiful as the day he found her by the river. More beautiful, because now she wore the patina of a life well lived, of love given and received. "I would find you again," Harrison said intently. "In every life, in every universe, I would find you. Because you are my heart, Felicity. You always have been. You always will be." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and in that kiss was the history of their years together and the promise of years to come. The seasons continued their endless cycle. The ranch prospered and adapted to changing times. Henry proved to be an excellent manager with Rachel at his side. Hope eventually met a veterinarian named David, who was setting up practice in the area, and they fell in love over their shared passion for animals. Their wedding in 1912 was another joyous occasion, and when Hope gave birth to twins a year later, Harrison declared himself the most blessed grandfather in all of Texas. Randall and Elizabeth's blended family thrived, with her children growing up to be fine young people who contributed to the ranch's success. The family tree that had seemed in danger of withering when Harrison was alone was now flourishing with branches in every direction. As Harrison entered his 60s, he began to slow down physically, though his mind remained sharp. He passed on more and more responsibility to the younger generation, but remained involved in major decisions. He loved spending time with his grandchildren, teaching them about the land and the animals, passing on the knowledge that had been passed to him. Felicity aged gracefully, still beautiful and vital despite the years. She continued to manage the business aspects of the ranch and remained active in community affairs. Her wisdom and compassion had made her a respected figure in the region, and people sought her counsel on matters both practical and personal. In the spring of 1920, Harrison and Felicity celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner, just the two of them. The house was unusually empty, with the younger generations off on various errands, and they savored the rare privacy. "Do you ever miss the excitement of those early days?" Felicity asked over dessert. When everything was new and uncertain, Harrison considered the question. "I miss being young," he admitted. "Having the energy to work all day and dance all night. But do I miss the uncertainty? No. I much prefer knowing that you will be beside me when I wake up every morning, that we have built something lasting and good." "I feel the same," Felicity said. "Though I must confess, sometimes I look at our grandchildren and envy their whole lives stretching ahead of them. All those possibilities and adventures still to come." "We have had our adventures," Harrison reminded her. "We are still having them. Every day with you is an adventure, Felicity. Maybe not the kind that involves danger and drama, but the kind that matters more. The adventure of an ordinary life lived extraordinarily well." Felicity reached across the table and took his hand. "You have such a gift for saying exactly what I need to hear," she said. As the 1920s progressed, the world changed in ways both wonderful and terrible. The Great War had ended, but its effects rippled through society. The economy boomed and then crashed. Technology advanced at a dizzying pace. But through it all, the Tucker Ranch remained a constant, a place where values and traditions held firm even as the modern world pressed in. In 1925, as Harrison approached his 70th birthday, he began to feel his mortality more keenly. He was still healthy and active, but he tired more easily and felt aches in joints that had never bothered him before. He began to think seriously about the future, about what would happen to Felicity and the ranch when he was gone. "Stop that," Felicity said when she caught him brooding one evening. "Stop thinking about dying. You are going to be around for a long time yet, and I do not want to waste our remaining years mourning prematurely." "I am not mourning," Harrison protested. "I am planning. There is a difference." "There is a fine line," Felicity countered, "and you are crossing it." "Everything is in order, Harrison. The ranch will pass to Henry and Hope as it should. I will be provided for, though I intend to remain active and involved for as long as I am able. You have done everything right. Now please, just enjoy what we have." Harrison pulled her close. "You are right," he said. "I am sorry. It is just hard sometimes knowing that our time is finite." "All time is finite," Felicity said. "That is what makes it precious. We could have 40 more years together or 4. We do not know. What we do know is that we have right now this moment. Let us make it count." They did make it count, savoring each day and finding joy in small things. Morning coffee on the porch, evening walks around the property, Sunday dinners with the whole family gathered around the big table. Quiet moments stolen in the midst of busy days. Just the two of them remembering and dreaming and being grateful. In the summer of 1928, the Tucker family gathered for a reunion unlike any before. All of Harrison and Felicity's children and grandchildren were present, along with Randall and his family and extended relations who had traveled from various parts of Texas and beyond. The ranch had never been so full of life and laughter. As patriarch of this sprawling family, Harrison gave a speech that brought tears to many eyes. He talked about humble beginnings and unexpected blessings. He spoke of hard work and perseverance. He honored the memory of those who had come before, particularly Martha and his parents. But mostly he talked about love. "I found my wife crying by a river 45 years ago," Harrison said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "She told me she was lost. I told her she was found. But the truth, which I have learned over these many years, is that we found each other. And in finding each other, we built all of this. Every person here is a product of that moment, that choice to help a stranger in need. Love ripples outward in ways we cannot predict or measure. It creates families and communities and legacies. So I charge all of you, every generation represented here, to remember that. To choose love over fear, compassion over indifference, connection over isolation. That is the true legacy of the Tucker family." The crowd erupted in applause, and Felicity stood beside her husband with tears streaming down her face. She looked out at the sea of faces, all connected to her and Harrison through bonds of blood and love, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, after everyone had finally settled down and the house was quiet, Harrison and Felicity made their way to their bedroom. They moved slowly now, their bodies no longer as spry as they once were, but they were together, and that was all that mattered. As they lay in bed, Harrison pulled Felicity close, fitting her body against his in the familiar way of long married couples. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" Felicity asked sleepily. "For everything," Harrison said. "For saying yes when I asked you to marry me. For building this life with me. For loving me all these years. For giving me children and grandchildren and a purpose beyond myself. For being my partner and my friend and the love of my life. Just thank you for all of it." Felicity turned in his arms so she could look at his face in the dim moonlight coming through the window. "You saved me," she said. "In every way a person can be saved. I was lost and alone and frightened, and you found me. You gave me a home and a family and a love beyond anything I could have imagined. So thank you, Harrison Tucker. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for this beautiful, extraordinary life." They kissed then, gentle and tender, and fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had done thousands of times before. Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cold January morning in 1930, at the age of 74. He went to bed beside Felicity and simply did not wake up, his heart finally giving out after a long life fully lived. Felicity discovered him when dawn broke, and though she had known this day would eventually come, the reality of it broke her in ways she had not anticipated. The funeral was the largest the region had ever seen. People came from hundreds of miles away to pay their respects to a man who had lived with integrity and kindness. Henry delivered a eulogy that captured his father's character perfectly. Hope sang a hymn in a voice breaking with emotion. Randall, now an old man himself, wept openly at the loss of the brother who had given him a second chance. They buried Harrison in the family cemetery on the ranch, overlooking the land he had loved and worked all his life. Felicity stood at the graveside, supported by her children, and said goodbye to the man who had been her whole heart for 45 years. In the weeks and months that followed, Felicity struggled with grief unlike anything she had experienced before. The house felt empty without Harrison's presence. The bed was too big and too cold. Every corner held memories that made her weep. Well-meaning family members suggested she might want to move into town, perhaps live with Henry and Rachel or Hope and David, but Felicity refused. "This is my home," she said firmly. "Mine and Harrison's. I'm not leaving it." So she stayed, and slowly, painfully, she learned to live with the grief instead of being consumed by it. She threw herself into ranch business, remaining active and involved even as her own body began to fail. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, seeing Harrison in their faces and finding comfort in the legacy they had created together. On a warm July afternoon in 1935, at the age of 77, Felicity made her way to the river where Harrison had found her so many years before. It was harder now to make the journey, her joints stiff and her breathing labored, but she was determined. She sat on the flat rock where she had wept that fateful day in 1883, and she let the memories wash over her. She thought about the scared, lost woman she had been. She thought about the kind rancher who had offered help without expecting anything in return. She thought about the love that had grown between them, steady and strong. She thought about their children and grandchildren, the ranch they had built, the community they had served, the life they had shared. "I am still found," she whispered to the river and the sky in Harrison's memory. "You found me, and I remained found. I will be found again soon, my love. Wait for me." Felicity Porter Tucker passed away in her sleep 2 months later on a September night when the stars were especially bright. Her children found her the next morning, peaceful and still, with a slight smile on her face as though she had seen something wonderful in her dreams. They buried her beside Harrison, their graves side by side overlooking the ranch they had built together. On the shared headstone beneath their names and dates, Henry had inscribed the words that captured their entire story. She was lost. He found her. Together they found home. The Tucker Ranch continued through the generations, stewarded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward the values Harrison and Felicity had instilled. The story of how their great-grandmother had been found weeping by the river became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as a reminder of where they came from and what mattered most. Love, it turned out, was the greatest legacy of all. More valuable than land or cattle or wealth. The love Harrison and Felicity had shared created something that could not be measured or quantified, but could be felt in every corner of the ranch they had called home. It lived on in their descendants, in the kindness they showed strangers, in the way they chose compassion over cruelty, connection over isolation, hope over despair. The river still flows through that stretch of Texas rangeland, swift and brown, unchanged by the passage of time. The cottonwood trees still provide shade on hot summer days. And on the flat rock where a lost woman once wept, flowers now grow wild and beautiful, as though the land itself remembers and honors the love story that began there all those years ago. In the end, that was what mattered. Not wealth or status or accomplishments, though the Tuckers had their share of all three. What mattered was that a man chose kindness when he could have ridden past, that a woman chose courage when she could have given up, that two people found each other across the gulf of loneliness and built a life that echoed through generations. She was lost. He found her. And in finding each other, they created something eternal. That was the story of Harrison Tucker and Felicity Porter Tucker, rancher and teacher, husband and wife. Two souls who met by chance beside a river in 1883 and chose love. Their story ended with death, as all stories must, but the love they shared never died. It lived on in the land, the family, and the countless lives they touched. It lived on in every act of kindness done in their memory, every choice made to help rather than harm, every moment when someone chose love over fear. That was their legacy, and it endured long after they were gone, a testament to the transformative power of two simple words: you are found.